Welcome, future teachers, on your first year semester 1 mathematics module briefing of what to expect this semester with Miss T. Vega. Welcome, student teachers. In this lesson, we'll be outlining what mathematics tertiary module to be taught and assessed on your first year module and your first semester module. What is the agenda? We are going to go through mathematics content covered in first semester year 1 according to CAPS, how they understand what is mathematics, the aims, the skills, and the content of mathematics. And Luneta's teaching mathematics foundation and intermediate phase textbook. Also using Killen's teaching strategies for quality teaching and learning. Later on, we are going to need a literature book to teach us how to use literature to teach measurements and geometry content. Now here are the textbook and book you're going to use later on in need. Luneta, K, Teaching Mathematics Foundation and Intermediate Phase, Roy Killen, Teaching Strategies for Quality Teaching and Learning, Department of Education, Curriculum and Assessment Policy Statements, better known as CAPS. And the literature book, the title of it is called An Adventure in Capacity. Now, the first thing they are probably going to teach you by most universities, they look at the second section of CAPS. What like the definition of mathematics, the aims of mathematics as a teacher in the classroom, with the content and the skills the teacher should uphold according to CAPS, and the content to be covered, the specific focus context area such as numbers and operations, pattern, space and shape, which is geometry, measurements, and data handling as an example. But now in the university tertiary level, for mathematics level, if your school prescribes Luneta and CAPS, most probably they will take the first 3 chapters of Luneta and intertwine it with section 2, 2.1 to 2.5 of CAPS, because they go well along with each other. Luneta teaches what is CAPS in schools and in content knowledge, how do they possibly impact society on teaching mathematics. And the second chapter would be learning mathematics, recognizing the different theories of learning to be used in a classroom. And the third, still in second chapter, personal theory, on how do you like make up your own personal theory after knowing different types of theories and teaching maths. Learning maths, And the third chapter would be teaching mathematics, how the beliefs of mathematics and mathematics learning and mathematics learners underpin mathematics teaching, and explain the roles that assessment, planning, and different types of knowledge play in effective mathematics learning. Also discussing the principles and environments required to effectively teach mathematics. All very well. The first 3 chapters of Luneta goes very well with the section 2 of CAPS. Let's look at an example of how they would take CAPS and the first 3 Luneta's chapter of the book through an assessment. This is an example of an assessment, how they would do that. So here it states that the theories of learning applied to teaching mathematics. Now you have to cover various theories of learning relevant to teaching mathematics. Which theory or combinations of theories do you feel most consistent with the following scenarios? The first scenario is the way you were taught mathematics at school level, whether primary or high school level. The second scenario is the best way for current educators to ensure they develop specific aims and skills as prescribed by CAPS. So now they are expecting you to motivate your answer with CAPS as your reference and other additional sources. Most probably best to use Luneta. Explain the difference and the similarities between your answers between the first and the second scenario. How did the way you were taught at school affect your beliefs, attitude towards mathematics, and if the teaching methods used at your school level were more in line with the answer at scenario B, what are the beliefs and attitudes in mathematics be any different? Evaluate your own personal belief regarding teaching and learning in mathematics. Which theories of learning are you most consistent with your beliefs as a pre-service teacher entering in the teaching world? For that type of assessment, it would be very much recommended for you to look at Luneta's chapter 2, page 33, where they cover learning as a changing mind, a topic explaining social learning theory and constructivism. And just to give you a bit of a taste of what constructivism, they're basically saying it's initiative, construction, and generation of meanings through the process completed by a learner's interaction with the old and the new knowledge individual, and as an active, the individual is an active agent of constructivism of the mathematical meaning based on the prior knowledge and experience. So basically what they are saying at this statement is that Piaget's constructivism theory state that the child is in control of how they construct and generate the meanings to them about the context or the mathematical concepts. Why the process, how that happens is that if the child would always refer to their prior knowledge to understand the new content. For an example, if I tell a child, okay, 1 plus 1 is equal to 2, the child is still, let's say it's in foundation, the child is still trying to grasp the symbol of 1, and you want to teach them 1 plus another 1 is equal to 2. So it's better to take a stick, something they understand, something they touched, it's their prior knowledge, and put it next to another stick and say, this is 1, the first stick, this is another one, the second stick. If you put them together, which is adding, how many sticks do you get? 2. So that's how you refer to their prior knowledge. What do you understand? That a stick alone looks like a 1, and a stick alone refers to the concept of 1. 1 is one individual object. 1 is a singular. 1 is not a lot of things, just one object or just a symbol. So that's how you build new knowledge onto a child using their prior knowledge. That is Piaget's constructivism. So apparently they state in Luneta's book that it's only one of the learning techniques that could be used to implicate learning in numeracy, and it's a good learning mechanism to make up or to stimulate assimilation and accommodation, along with building the schema and principles of equilibrium and reflective abstraction. That was a lot, first of all, but what it means in pure sense is that constructionalism is very handy at teaching the child the concept of numeracy, and as a learning mechanism to stimulate assimilation. Okay, what is assimilation? What is accommodation? First of all, let's start with accommodation. Accommodation is when the child has prior knowledge, what they know, and then you present a new concept, making a connection with the existing content, which is a prior knowledge, between the new content and the old one. And when you build that bridge between the two, that's what we call accommodating the new with the old, and then the whole process is called assimilation. Now the child has a new building block of information on top of what they know. They have accepted the new information because they have a foundation of prior knowledge through constructionalism. So that goes as explaining the schema theory, where accommodation happens of the new information with the old one to assimilate, to build a fresh new understanding, a bigger picture of the new content, the new knowledge. Moving on, it would be best to also take in the points at chapter 2, page 42, covering under the topic developing your own theory of mathematics. As they asked, what is your theory of learning in the question? And they asked if, excuse me, they asked you to also state your beliefs, state the belief of math, states the learning theories, and this chapter 346, covers all of that under the topic what does it mean to teach mathematics, and the other topics, connections between beliefs topic, which mentions how a teacher has to have adaptive characteristics to be effective in teaching mathematics, and according to CAPS, and the teacher has to view mathematics as an evolving and ever-changing body of knowledge to explore. So you have to be well researched personally as a teacher, according to Killen, and you have to assure your assurance has to exert out confidence and competence in dealing with mathematical situation, so much so that it just shows to your kids you don't have fear towards the mathematics topics. It's playing a role in facilitating the learner's confidence in self-directed learning. So now, because you're a teacher who knows your content and you're sure about it and you explain well and you reassure the child that math is not an intimidating module, it's fun, it can be used in reality, it can be related to what you know through your prior knowledge, it gives the child confidence to want to learn on their own. So the beliefs, according to Luneta, a teacher's belief in teaching and learning has 3 categories, which is instrumental, Platonian, and problem solving. Instrumentalist based on the content focused with an emphasis on performance, along with passive reciprocation of knowledge and learning. And Platonist is based on content focused with an emphasis on understanding, along active construction of understanding learning. Super different. Finally, problem solving is focused on the learner, is learner focused, exploring the interest in learning. So those are the 3 beliefs in teaching and learning mathematics according to Luneta. That would be a good answer to the example of the assessment. Okay, in first semester, be sure to know that they will focus mostly on section 2. They won't do it again on the rest of the years in year 2 and year 3. They won't do that to you again, but they would really practice this a lot, because they want you to have the foundation of what the South African cabs expect you to, what aim skills, the attitude they expect you to uphold. And under 2.7, specification of content also goes along with Luneta's chapters for each content area. The first one is numbers, operation, and relationship. The second one is patterns, functions, and algebra. Third one is space and shape, geometry. Fourth one is measurements. Third one is fifth one, is data handling. So we are going to look at how Luneta's textbook at first semester goes along with the content area presented in caps. So the first one would be numbers, operation, and relationships. Luneta will teach you chapter 10, how numeracy in curriculum goes along well. In chapter 11, they will develop your sense of numbers. These two would be covered in semester 2. And for measurements, Luneta chapter 12 will teach you a sense of measurements and geometry, and chapter 6, communications, making connections in mathematics. That's when we use literature to teach mathematics. And data handling is just basic, just learning the definition of stats and probability in chapter 13. Let's look at Luneta for but for the first semester content areas. Okay, numbers, operations, and relationship. Chapter 10, numeracy and curriculum. What Luneta has on her table of content is, the first thing is, what is numeracy? What is numeracy across the curriculum? So now this is where you describe the relationship between maths and numeracy, and this is where we explore opportunities and challenges arising from connecting mathematics and numeracy to all subjects, and critical in numeracy. At chapter 11, Luneta teaches us the developing a sense of number, which is understanding a number sense. This is where we learn to illustrate what is involved in having well-developed number senses. It also on Luneta's book, it teaches us the number senses in practice. It demonstrates an awareness of the key idea and strategies needed to work flexibly and comfortably with numbers in variety of forms. So it develops a sense of numbers in practice. An example of an assessment testing chapter 10, Luneta's chapter 10, would be, according to Luneta, a well-developed sense of a number requires a deep and flexible understanding of numeration. This means knowledge of different number sets and how they are written, presented, related together with understanding of the ways in which operations on number might be presented in different contexts. Focus on number sense. Required to write a well-constructed essay which you outline which of the big ideas are crucial to well-developed sense of numeracy and reflect the role of number sense in everyday problem solving and reasoning. In your essay, it must be an academic essay format. So, points to include in this kind of assessment. You now have to say numeracy is the ability to use mathematical skills to solve daily situations between shopping, budgeting, preparing food, administration, medicine, reading. That is all in Luneta's book, chapter 10, saying that numeracy is perceived as minor class of mathematical skills, but mathematics expresses the power of conceptualizing and abstracting that is not necessarily used in real-life experiences, while numeracy conveys the power of content and practicality of maths in real-life situations. There are many methods in developing sense of numeracy and key indications. Scaffolding learner learning is primary method to teach mathematics used by teachers and force of ideas and strategies in numbers. As trusting count is a learner ability to recite all number naming sequences to 10 and beyond. Failure to do so is usually failure to understanding numbering structures and or mismatch oral numbering. Key indicator of gaining ability to count objects is a learner's action of mentally aligning objects into a collection without physically counting, called subtest. Advanced would be place value as you count from 0 to 100 charts. Additive thinking would be a combination concept of place value and trusting counts. Just to skim through this, those are points to include in that kind of essay. Include what is multiplicative thinking, the relationship ranging from problem content, disposal, compose and decompose numbers to find pathways to find solution, the understanding of mathematics and its processes, word problems and tip of referring to keyword without paraphrasing or solving a mathematical problem in hand, assisting numeracy, assisting in problem solving and result reasoning. Learners can require the strong numeric sense to build basics of mathematical phases of secondary school. Numeracy has shown use of many developments, use in many other disciplines of profession, such as workers understanding employment conditions, attaining income taxes requires mathematical relationship, according to Luneta. Measurements is covered under chapter 12, sense of measurements, for Luneta's textbook. The first thing they mention is linking measurements with geometry and what is measurements, the developing sense of measurements, geometry and spatial sense. What are we to learn from this whole chapter is reflect on how the role of number sense in everyday problem solving and reasoning and describe an awareness of key ideas and strategies needed to work flexibly and confidently with numbers in a variety of forms. An example of using that chapter 12, Luneta's chapter 12, along with a literature book, an assessment for that would be this one at hand, where they are asking you to communicate maths through literature book. That's Luneta's page 103, highlighting the advantages integrating teaching maths with the children's literature book. So here you are to provide a mathematical idea in real content, in reality basically, giving them opportunities for a rich problem solving and giving a child an opportunity to communicate mathematically and justify their reason and gain awareness of the perspectives. It stimulates imagination and creativity. It provides a glimpse of how maths could really work in a real world and help you solve problems in the real world, and require you to identify one book that's appropriate for grade 4 and can be used to teach any relevant content. In our case, it's measurements and geometry. And once you have identified that story, provide the title, the author, the picture of the front cover with a short description of the storyline, and don't forget to reference the book at the referencing reference list, and list the exact content in which you're going to cover from CAP's documents, and that is only under grade 4, which is page 35 to 103. You will call this CAP specific of focus. Specificity is the following: the term that the work will be computed, the content area, the specific topic under the content area, the concepts and skills that your activity will focus on. Do not forget to reference and include the page numbers. Now the breakdown that will be taken from CAPS is not even further into more specific like components. We'll call it a summary of content to cover. An example of this information or cover might be prior knowledge, that will be a recap, and the new vocabulary they have been introduced, the number range, and the use of concrete apparatus. This is an example of how I would answer the assessment, which is communicating mathematics through literature. And the title, as they stated, the description of the literature, the first thing they asked for is the title: Pastry School in Paris, an adventure in capacity, the author, the year, the content covered, and the cover page. I said they should refer to page 5. And here's the storyline. The zealous twins, Matt and Pitt, were deeply passionate about baking, and who loved baking so much that they decided to join the International Pastry Academy of Baking, and they traveled to Paris with their parents. During class, they learned the different shapes and sized containers and the basics of from 1 liter measuring jars to 500 millimeters jars. They learned value of capacity equivalents of 1 pint is equal to 2 cups, and 1 cup is equal to 125 milliliters. half a liter is equal to 500 milliliter as a metric system of liquid measurements. This helps authentic learning as the literature implements mathematical ideas in real-life situations where the knowledge of capacity and volume can be used. In this literature story, Matt and Brett were tasked to help the chef to correctly provide measured liquids to make lollipops, which required a revision of how 1 tablespoon is equal to 2 teaspoons, and from previous use of different measuring jars. This shows the learners how their own peers in mathematical communication can be used in real life with just simple kitchen apparatus. This could be found at home, and the visual backgrounds of Paris' famous landmarks on the school windows encourages imagination, and during the lesson the general inspector oversees the class while the chef steps out. The zealous twins were assigned by the inspector to make a treat, and the twins decided to use their gained knowledge to follow the right volumes of ingredients using the correct kitchen apparatus at the right capacity. The goal to make deliciously balanced brownies, and this mathematical literature allowed learners to understand the real-life problems that can be solved using mathematical ideas. Now, the specific content of CAPS. This content was completed in grade 4 term 3, where the content area of measurements, capacity and volume as topic under the content area, and the concept of this topic is practical measurement of 3D objects through estimation, use of measurements, recording, comparing, the ordering of measuring instruments such as spoons, cups, jars in millimeters or liters. Learned the skill of problem solving within capacity and volume, context, and calculations. The book was written to support CAPS documents, focusing on the story, emphasizing on grade 4 term 3 measurement topic. Volume and capacity topics and skills were practical measuring of 3D shapes by estimating, as Martin Beebe had estimated that 1 pint is equal to 2 cups, measuring as the zealous twin measured liquids to make lollipops, helping the chef, recording as they used the recipe to make the inspector's treat, and also comparing and ordering. Mathematics content stipulated and CAPS documents for grade 4 to 6 requires teaching learners measuring instruments, for example, measuring spoon, measuring cups, measuring jars, as the literature has accommodated that point, as zealous twins used these utilities making lollipops and the inspectors general treats. The mathematical grade 4 content approved by CAPS includes the importance of the units, which is of measuring units, which is milliliter, liters, and the calculations of problem solving relating it to capacity, volume, and learn to convey liters to milliliters. Now, in summary of the contents to cover, you cover prior knowledge from the previous grade, where the learner is informally into CAPS, where there are studies that influence prior knowledge on learning and memory may span multiple learning processes, and the learner, where the learners worked with a liter and milliliter jars and spoon, but grade 4 contents teach learners to use calibrated numbered jars and instruments. So the difference from the previous grade, that it was uncalibrated, this one is grade 4. Grade 3 is uncalibrated, grade 4 is calibrated numbered jars and instruments. This ensures practiced understanding of how much a liter and a milliliter is in relation of capacity and volume. The capacity is a measure of developability of the substance, and capacity is the measurable ability to take in substance, and volume is the amount of substance when within the container. For example, a 1 liter measuring jar contains 125 liters of water, of volume of water. So it may be 1 liter, that's its capacity, but inside there's 125 milliliters of water, of volume of water. So the jar's capacity is 1 liter and the volume of water is 125. A new vocabulary of content. So, for example, if a number range of 1 liter in a liter is 1000 milliliters. So how to convert milliliters to liters? You divide it by 1000. How to convert a liter to milliliters? By multiplying. For an example, 1 liter multiplied by 1000 equals 1000 milliliters. 125 milliliters divided by 1000 equals 0.125 liters. Use an estimation. Mathematic concepts for grade 4 always also requires teaching how to estimate, predict measurements of content capacity. At first glance, the teacher introduces calibrated in class and apparatus in which 1 liter jars, 5 liter bottles from home cleaning detergents, 500 milliliter water bottles as commonly seen in stores, and 2 mathematics contents for grade 4 is also to require teaching on how to estimate or predict measurements. The learner has to read the calibrated line of the apparatus. As you can see, there's a beaker, the cylinder, another cylinder, and just showing a lot. The need to record measurements and content, and develop the learner's ability to find relationship between capacity and volume to help calculation and problem solving is mentioned. The advantage of using literature is that learners are engaged in the mathematical concepts, and literature involves the child in communicating mathematical concepts, visual presentations, concepts that stimulate creative imagination, and working through mathematical problems adventurous, such that a personal experience can stimulate learning as authentic learning. So it was a very innovative literature book to use to teach capacity and measurements. Okay, let's look at fourth section, which is assessment. Right at the end of your semester, they look at how assessment according to Luneta, reporting assessment and reporting chapter 8, which is assessment of learning, assessment for learning, and according to Killen's assessment principles, which is chapter 15, they look at formal and informal, formative and summative assessments, which goes along very well with section 4 of CAPS. So it's CAPS, Luneta, and Killen's just stating their views on what is assessment and different types of assessments. So what to note is that according to Luneta, assessment for learning, we need to really focus on the for to get the differences. Assessment for learning gives a purpose used to extract information as evidence of the learner's progression. Assessment for learning is formative according to Luneta, and according to Killen, it states that formative assessment is a form of assessment that is done during classroom lessons and can be used as enrichment purposes on developing a learner's understanding. The assessment may or may not be used as documented marks for the term and just practice worksheets. The assessment gives feedback to the teacher on the learner's weaknesses and strengths. The teacher may use it to reflect on how effective his or her teaching strategies on the learner's learning awareness. So now, according to CAPS, it states that informal assessment is an everyday monitoring a learner's progress done through observation, discussions, practical demonstration, learner-teacher conferences, informal classroom interactions, etc. Informal assessment is used to provide feedback to the learner and to inform planning for teaching, and need not to be recorded as a course mark that is informative. And according to Luneta, states that the assessment of, keep that in mind, the assessment of learning is an assessment where the learner is being tested after a completion of a concept or course. The purpose of this assessment is to compile evidence on the child or the learners has fulfilled the requirements for progression in learning at the end of the content. Now, the assessment of learning is used to record results and can be used as a formal report or as just promotional purposes in examination or test form. The assessment of learning is summative in nature. According to Killen, state that summative assessment is implemented at the end of the course of instruction to draw a valid conclusion about the learner's knowledge and understanding and these skills. So to wrap this a bit together, the assessment for learning is not necessarily your test. It's more like your worksheets in class, your homework. It's something to reinforce the learning the child has been taught about that concept of the day of that lesson. Killen and says, well, while Luneta is saying learning assessment for learning is formative, Killen is going on to explain again that formative is during a lesson kind of worksheets to get feedback on where the child might be struggling, where the child is strong, and how the teacher can make the strategies more beneficial to the child's learning. And this is also seen as an everyday kind of assessment during class. What CAPS calls everyday assessments is informal. So now we have three different views from Luneta, Killen, CAPS talking about the same thing. Luneta calls it assessment for learning. Killen calls it formative, and CAPS call it informal. So informal assessment is assessment for learning. It's formative, all in all, from these three statements. Now, the end of the year, the end of content, the end of course, the end of term is when we talk about the assessments of learning, because now we are now collecting evidence of how the child has done. Have they met the requirements of progression at the end of the course? So the assessments of learning tells us how the child did for promotional purposes in exams or tests, and that's what Killen calls summative at the end of the course. So it's both formal and assessment of learning is summative and formal. Okay, here are the examples. This is a worksheet. This is what we call a formative. Formative is also what? Assessment for learning, and it's informal. This is an example. Nothing too hectic. Notice not a lot of marks on it, and it sticks to Bloom's taxonomy, but the most fixed on Bloom's taxonomy is the text. Starts at the first stage and builds up to end up to evaluation or creation. So this is assessment of learning, that is for learning. The test is of learning, for learning is for worksheets. And just to carry on for the assessment of learning, assessment of learning. So that is the test, examinations, hectic, isn't it? So it reaches every part of Bloom's taxonomy. This test is using the example of measurements. Okay, as we said before, data handling for Luneta sticks to the definition really of the chapter. Still to cover. That's it for today's lesson. But if you want to read, learn more, there are chapters of Killen's in teaching and learning. The first one, the upcoming video, would be using direct instruction, chapter 6, and the example of it would be a grade 4 materials around us lesson. And we are going to also teach discussion, the teaching strategies. Thank you for joining me in this lesson. The way to get started is to quit talking about it and begin doing, as Disney would say himself. Thank you so much for joining me in this lesson. I am Miss Vega. My YouTube channel is Miss Team Vega. Leave a comment on what you'd like to see, like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day and academic year.